All right, welcome back to the Roast It Yourself podcast brought to you by Coffee Bean Corral and Current Crop Roasting Shop. I'm Stephen Burnett with Coffee Bean Corral in Jackson, Mississippi, and with me digitally and always is Catherine Mansell, certified Q grader. Almost gave you a new job. Certified Q grader and director of Current Crop Roasting Shop in New Orleans, Louisiana. Catherine, how are you today? What is going on in NOLA?
I am getting ready for a ton of samples. I just got a big box of new samples of coffees from all over the world. So I'm gearing up and trying to figure out which ones I'm going to do first, which profiles I'm going to use, and kind of how I'm going to attack. I've got about 15. So there's quite a few to go through.
The second coolest job I've ever heard of. The first is mine, but definitely cool.
Yeah,
no, that's amazing. Cool. Good luck with all that up to your ears in new coffee. Exciting things to come from that.
Yeah.
Well, in spite of all of that coffee she's got to go through, each week we do set aside about 10 minutes to field questions from home coffee roasters and professionals alike about roasting, tasting, and most importantly, enjoying coffee. You can send your questions to questions@riypod.com. That's questions@riypod.com to get a nice shout out from us in an upcoming episode, and of course to get your question answered. We've got a question from Tim with River Mountain Roastery. So look up River Mountain Roastery, you guys, and check out Tim's roasted coffee. But he asks, thanks for the podcast. I benefited from it. The last podcast about the worst coffee ever, which is a good episode. We will link that in the show notes if you haven't heard it. Controversy brewing. This discussion relieved a concern that I have about the earthy taste that I get in some Ethiopian natural coffees I purchased from CBC. I recently roasted 1 pound of PNG Purosa, so PNG Papua New Guinea Purosa Organic, and got a nice medium roast. Then I roasted 2 1-pound batches of the Ethiopia Adame Natural using the same process and found some of the beans were darker than others in both batches. I roasted to the start of second crack. Could the color variation be due to the natural process? Thanks for considering this question. I'm a longtime customer of CBC and very satisfied with the beans and service. I received most shipments the next day. Thanks, Tim, River Mountain Roastery.
Nice.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for the question.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Okay, Catherine, what do we think about this? He roasted the PNG. He got a very nice medium, and he got the exact same process, or same roast, I guess, profile for the Adame, although he went right to the beginning of second crack and got a lot of color variation. So what is that, and should he be concerned?
I think each coffee is a little bit different, so it's not all going to roast the same way. But the big thing is, how does it taste? If you're looking at it and you're worried that the beans not all being exactly the same is going to negatively affect the taste, you really don't know until you start tasting it. I ordered coffee from a company that I know and love, and that I've bought coffee from for forever, and I got a light roast coffee. I was being adventurous. I've never been a big light roast person until the last couple of years, when I figured out how to roast a light roast well. And when I looked at it, when it got here, I opened it up and I thought, oh no, this is going to be terrible. The beans weren't nice and smooth. They looked just different than really any other beans that I had before, and I was not excited about trying the coffee at all. But it was absolutely fantastic. So I stopped worrying about what the coffee looked like, if there were some that were a little bit lighter or darker than others, only if the taste superseded all of that. So the first thing I go for is, what does it taste like? But I do think it being coffee from Papua New Guinea versus a coffee from Ethiopia, both processed differently, they're not going to roast exactly the same way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the same is true. Like, sometimes you'll pull a shot of espresso and it looks beautiful and the crema is perfect and it comes right out of the center and it looks absolutely gorgeous, and it's not that great. It's kind of lame. Like, all the goodness was in the visual of watching the shot pull, and after that it wasn't an enjoyable drink. And then I've had some, they just look miserable. They look sad and pathetic coming out of there's no crema, and they just don't look good at all, and you think they're going to be terrible, and they're actually really good. So your eyes can deceive you when it comes to coffee. Now, one thing I do want to mention here, just on this discussion, is if you've got, if by variation in roast color, you mean I found a Quaker, right? I've got a bean that just didn't roast. That really can negatively affect the coffee taste, and you'll taste that as soon as you grind that Quaker. You go, something is off here.
Yeah.
So it is something to say when you're roasting your coffee. If you have one that is vastly different than the rest, it's a Quaker. You should pull it out.
Yeah.
It almost look like they're just a little bit tan and not roasted like everything else. So sort through that. That's kind of a next level skill for home roasters. Like first you're just trying to get the roast down, but after a while start looking for imperfections. You can sort out the really small beans that may get darker, right? Sometimes there's, especially with Ethiopian coffees recently, I feel like there's been a lot of size discrepancy.
Yeah.
And so really, really small beans are going to roast darker, obviously. And so that can also be part of it. So once you sort through those kinds of things, I do think that natural coffees just have more of a color variation to them after roasting. For whatever reason, and I'm not smart enough to explain it, but I haven't found, coming full circle back to what you said, that the coloring of the beans makes a difference in the flavor just because. Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you. You sent me a bean density spreadsheet recently for everything that we were doing on the bullet, and I was curious. I don't have it pulled up now, but how different density-wise did you find with Indonesian coffees versus African coffees? Because they're grown at different elevations, and bean density can kind of change the way that it roasts as well. Do you remember any, if you found anything that was highly different?
Yeah, in my brain, I kind of found that that the bean density is measured in milliliters over grams. Or is it grams over milliliters? I can't remember. You're asking me off the cuff here, so we're going to go with it. I'm not a scientific person, but it's on my computer, okay? It's grams over milliliters. That's right. Because I have a little vial at work that I'll stuff the beans into and kind of get them all shaken down, and then I'll weigh it because I know the capacity of the vial in milliliters. And I found that the lower grown coffees and the Indonesian coffees tend to be on the lower side. So like it's like 0.6 to 0.65 to 0.75 was what I was finding at the lowest and the highest end of density. We may have more that were above that, but 0.65 and 0.75 I think were the bookends of the measurements I was getting out of them, which is pretty standard for specialty grade coffee. And at that 0.7, so in my brain, at the 0.7 line being the middle, the kind of median here, I found that the PNGs and the Indonesians were on the lower side. They were under 7, and a lot of the Ethiopians were over 7. And so it doesn't sound like much, but they roast very differently depending on density. And it's not a perfect measure that I have, but it's a really good approximation of density, just because I don't have all the equipment you would need to do that with. And I just had a vial and a scale, so we do what we can. This is the coffee home coffee roasters way. We do what we can. And I'll actually put a little the equation for that in the show notes if people want to get more nerdy and start measuring density. As long as you know the capacity of a vessel that you've got, and you can reliably, I got one that I could literally fill to the top, so I didn't see any beans sticking out the top of it, and I packed them as good as I can in there, and that's kind of how I do it. But I'll put that equation in there so you can do the math on that, and it'll help you. It's helped me to reference the last time I roasted that coffee, see how it roasted, and then use that density as the number one kind of indicator. So the more you know, right?
Yeah. Well, even when when I roast natural processes in a fresh roast, it's a little bit different. Say you do your favorite. So say I did the Bali Kintamani or I did the Adame. A lot of times I have to sort of stall out the temperature to make to let all the other beans
Yeah.
kind of catch up, and there'll be some
Yeah.
sort of a discoloration where they're not exactly all together roast level wise, but I
Right.
do find that a lot in natural processes. So that may be one factor that's contributing to it, but I find that a lot. So
I know.
It's a little
I
bit
looked
more
into
to
it when I first started roasting. I was looking into why is it, because I thought the color is like an even roast means all the color is the same across the bean from bean to bean. That's what
Yeah.
an even roast means, and really it just means that the beans have all reached the same level, or together on average they reach the same level of roast, and the flavors are developed the way you want them to be.
Yeah.
But we tend to we use these words in the coffee world that are helpful, but they approximate, right? They're just an approximate. They don't literally mean there's not one, pixel of color difference if you were to take a picture of the beans between all the beans. No. It can be totally even, and it can look like a mess. And so it's just something we have to kind of, again,
Right.
drink it and see if you enjoy it. But
Yeah.
in this complex topic, I'm sure we left something out. I'm sure
yeah.
we did. What do you think?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, totally. If we did, because we did, please fill us in so we can have this be a complete episode. This is only part of an episode until y'all come on and complete it with your facts and knowledge and decimal points and science references and links to other places where these questions are more thoroughly answered.
Yes.
But that's what we're here for, you guys. You're not gonna watch 10 minutes and become an amazing roaster instantly. We're introducing and answering and trying to cut through to the answers that help us when we roast coffee, when we actually sit down to roast coffee.
Yeah.
There's more depth out there. Go find it and bring it to us, please.
Yes.
We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed making it, which is always so much. And if you did, please leave us a rating and review on whatever platform you use. We're excited to watch the Roast Yourself podcast continue to grow and reach more people. We can't do that without you. We also can't do it without our audio video genius, Josh Santmeyer. He was a wizard last week. He's a genius this week. We're mixing it up. And graphic designer Jatavian Walker. He's just a regular graphic designer. He's not a genius or a wizard, just a regular old graphic designer. Jatavian
So
Walker.
good though.
Thank you both he's so good. Thank you for all you do week after week to make this podcast a reality. And remember, listener, to send your questions to questions@riypod.com. That's anything about coffee roasting or coffee in general. We'll be happy to take care of that on the show. Otherwise, have a great day and happy roasting.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. See you soon.